All right, so we got the aviation industry about to evolve and into something new. This was something back in the '60s, and then it got shut down, and now it's starting to come back up again. And it's supersonic flights across the world. So faster is better. And we got a great interview over at the Shawn Ryan show. He interviews Blake Scholl, the CEO of Boom Aviation. And this is the new supersonic airplane that is about to open up the doors and bring back supersonic aviation or fast aviation across the world. You know, like New York to London, and in less than 4 hours. So Overture is the supersonic airliner, commercial airliner that they're building. And companies like United Airlines, American Airlines, and Japan Airlines are starting to invest into this new technology that's about to come out. So let's head over to the Shawn Ryan interview and let's see what Blake Scholl has to say. Let's do it.
Let's move into, I mean, how did you get started? You went from Amazon to your company that you sold to Groupon. How did you get in? I mean, what is it with aerospace?
It's for some of us, there's just this magical flight thing, and it's a bug that bites us, and it never gets out. I remember taking my first flying lesson when I was an intern in college, working in the Bay Area, and I'll never forget that first takeoff. It was just magical. It was just sort of this experience of,
all right, this feels almost illegal to know, but our windows were so old.
crap, I have my life in my own hands, and also I have my life in my own hands. So it was both scary and empowering. And I've loved flight ever since. When I was in my 20s working at this startup in Seattle, there was one of the final Concords had been put out to the museum there, and I went and saw it. And I remember looking at the Concorde. I remember looking at the SR-71 Blackbird.
So the Concorde is the predecessor of what he's trying to build, the Overture. What you see, the little model next to his hand on the left. He's trying to build that airplane. It's the old Concorde that was, I think, taken down back in the 90s. So he's trying to bring that back. The Concorde from the past.
And thinking, like, how is it that the most amazing military airplane and the most amazing commercial airplane are both found in a museum, not in the skies? And I put a Google alert on Supersonic Jet that day, and I figured someone's going to obviously fix this. This was like 2007, so Concorde had been gone for about 4 years. And I thought, okay, somebody else is going to fix this. I want to be first to know when I could buy a ticket. I still have this email I wrote to my girlfriend about how much better our life would have been, if she'd been able to show up at Mach 2. And for basically a decade, it was just crickets. There was some talk of a supersonic private jet for the ultra wealthy. But I looked at Concorde, and I was in Amazon when Concorde got shut down. I never got to fly on it. Why? It's a $20,000 ticket.
Mm-hmm.
That was for royalty and rock stars.
That's crazy. The Concorde, which was the supersonic airplane at the time in the 90s, was $20,000 for a flight. That's insane. That was crazy.
And I don't have anything against private jets. I think they should exist. I think we should have supersonic private jets. But the big problem with Concorde was it wasn't affordable. And so meanwhile, I'd had this experience of starting my first company and selling it to Groupon. and it was I'd been at Amazon, so I thought I knew e-commerce, and then I'd been at this other startup that was building mobile apps, so I thought I knew mobile. And what everyone tells you is you should work on what you're good at, and so I thought I should work on mobile e-commerce. And so I end up, I can't say this with a straight face. I built a mobile barcode scanning game, and it's like the least important thing I could possibly work on. And I would, and yet, like, there's no such thing as an easy startup. I was worried I'd lose all the investors' money. I was at times super depressed, and I'd wake up and think, like, why did I get into this? How do I get out of it? And so when I had a chance to kind of sell the company to Groupon and the investors got their money back in a little bit, it was my escape fantasy had come true.
By the way, Groupon, I think, is completely non-existent now. They used to do coupons, I guess virtual coupons for supermarkets and all that. Yeah. I remember Groupon, but I think it's gone now.
Nonetheless, I had loved that experience of being my own boss, of creating something from scratch. And I just figured, man, I just want to invert every decision I made at that company. And I never want to work on something where I have to ask myself, is it worth it? So after a couple years at Groupon, having gone one level from barcode scanning game to internet coupon, I just couldn't, I couldn't take any more of those phone calls saying, send more email, Blake. And, fired myself. And I thought, let me put all my startup ideas in order of how happy I would be if it worked.
How many startup ideas did you have?
I was looking at my notes from this a couple of weeks ago because I actually kept a journal back then, and there were probably a couple dozen.
I'm just curious, what were some of the other ideas?
Oh, they were terrible.
Were they all in aerospace?
Some of them were, and some of them, like I had an idea for a better rental car company. I had an idea. Probably the most promising thing I had on the list was a convenience-oriented airline that would fly out of private terminals rather than commercial terminals. And it turned out somebody else did that. That became basically JSX.
Okay.
And I'm a big fan of that. But I ended up saying I want to just focus on what would be most awesome if it worked, and I'll leave everything else aside, including whether I think I personally have any business working on it.
By the way, there's a big market on the rise for private aviation at low cost. It's starting to pick up a lot more. Private jets, smaller jets are starting to become more affordable, and it's not cheap, but it's starting to become a thing. So what he was doing probably at that time was something good, but like everything, he let that one go to make something better.
I remember when I decided I wanted to do Supersonic, I remember calling my mom and telling her, and she said, Blake, shouldn't you work on something you know something about? and it's what every mom would say, right? Because it's the conventional standard advice to work on what you know about. And I think the actual much better thing is to work on what you love. So if you stop any successful entrepreneur, on the day they make it, let's say day of IPO, and you say, hey, of what you know today, how much of it did you know on the day you started? And I think the answer would be almost none. Like you have to learn the vast majority of how you scale a company and how you lead an organization and how you sell and blah, blah, blah. Like everybody has to get reinvented along this journey. Mm-hmm. You're going to learn 99% new stuff. So why not learn 99.5% new stuff and work on something that you really, really love? So I sort of said, okay, I'm going to look at this Supersonic thing. And I thought I would get 2 weeks into it and be done with it.
That had to be, the intimidation factor had to be pretty high.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the weirdest thing was...
Ever dreamed of leaving the ground level life behind?
I mean, so I got slightly down path with it over a few months of expecting that I was going to talk myself out of it. But every time I would go and study something, I would just find that the conventional wisdom was wrong. and that anybody with a spreadsheet and a web browser could build a basic model that said you should be able to fly supersonic with today's technology. So I took an airplane design class. I put myself through remedial calculus and physics because I hadn't had any since high school. I remember in the middle of 2014, I had a spreadsheet model of the airplane and a spreadsheet model of the market. And I took them both to a professor at Stanford. And I said, dude, would you look at this? Because I don't know what I'm doing. But if my math is right, this is all practical. And he looks at it and he clicks around and he says, Blake, if you're going to actually consider this, you need to be more aggressive because all your assumptions are conservative. And I remember leaving his office and thinking, either I have no courage or I'm going to try to find some great people and go do this. And that was the weirdest part is I'm like, who am I to go build a supersonic jet company? And, I would tell my friends I was looking at it and I could just see their eyes roll back. And I struggled with.
And I think also too, like there was not, because we haven't seen any supersonic projects till now. He's like the first one that's bringing it to the table again. It's crazy. It's been so long since anybody decided to start doing supersonic aviation again, commercial aviation.
I struggled with my own ego a lot in that because it's such a bold declaration to say I'm going to go build a supersonic airliner. Like if it works, I'm almost definitionally part of history, and so I'm like declaring to myself and my friends that I'm going to try to be a historic figure. Like that was really weird, and I think like, man, does this make me somebody really arrogant to even go try this? And I struggled with it, and I remember thinking back about Bill Gates' story, who'd been one of my heroes in high school, and he had famously, I think in the late 70s, said that his goal for Microsoft was to put a personal computer in every home and on every desk running Microsoft software. And he said that in, I don't know, something like 78. And then he did that and then some. And so I tried to ask myself, what was it like to be Bill Gates and say that? He wouldn't have succeeded if he hadn't gone for it. Mm-hmm. And it wouldn't have happened on one hand. On the other hand, they're probably, like, I think of it as the dark matter of entrepreneurs. The people who try for big missions and go for it and don't make it. And we don't know who they are. Their names are lost to history. But they knew who they are, and they know they gave it their all. And for me, the choice was I'd rather be embarrassed in front of my friends. I'd rather be in the dark matter of entrepreneurs than be 80 or 90 years old looking back and thinking, I would have loved to work on supersonic flight. What would have happened if I tried?
Yeah, I can relate to that in
That's true.
other aspects. Who was the first person that believed in you?
Avichal Garg was at least the first person to say he believed in me. This was somebody I'd gone to high school with in Cincinnati who had gone on, he'd sold a company to Facebook, he'd been quite successful in his own right. And I remember I was having lunch with him at the Facebook cafeteria when I was thinking about all this stuff, and I kind of gave him the pitch. And he says, Blake, you should do it. And I was like, really? No one else says that. And years later, he told me that he actually thought I was crazy. But he could tell I was just so darn passionate about it. He didn't have the heart to tell me not to.
No kidding.
And so
Well, I mean, think about it. Supersonic, everybody remembers the Concorde. Well, slowly people are starting to forget the Concorde because it's been a long time since anybody came up with anything until now. This guy Blake, and he's trying to bring that back. But I mean, the commercial aviation industry is pretty much on lockdown.
I think the reality was on day one, nobody believed it, not even me.
Wow. How old were you when you decided to make the shift?
33.
33 years old. Wow. And how long after you decided to do it, did you start the company? And I mean, when did the cardboard cutouts and all that kind of stuff start happening?
Yeah, let's see. So I left Groupon in something like March of 2014. And then I set the company up on paper in September of that year. I decided,
Quick.
well, to me, that feels slow. But
Really?
yeah, I had in my head that I would take a few, months off. I think I only took a few weeks off before I really got focused on it. And it was around that time, I was still living in California. I hadn't moved to Denver yet. And I think I had some, folding chairs and some, plastic tubes that I was using in my basement just by myself to try and figure out how small could you make an airliner and still have it be comfortable. The diameter of these things matters for the fuel efficiency. And then I moved to Denver in early 2015 and hired our first few people. And one of the first things we did is start building mock-ups.
And you're doing your own engine. You're doing everything. It's all.
We're doing our own engines. We're not doing our own everything. But I've become a big believer that if there is a custom part needed on the airplane, it's much better to vertically integrate it than to outsource it.
Hey.
Yeah, so let's go through. Let's go through the. Yeah, I mean, a lot of the stuff right now is all built in separate compartments in the aviation industry. So let's just go through all these. Skipping through the ads here. There we go.
About, you'd overturned in 115 days. Now we can do supersonic travel. And so how did that all come about?
Yeah, so it was actually not part of the original plan.
Really?
Yeah, so everyone thinks that the point of the whole company was to solve sonic boom, and so of course we were going to go demonstrate the sonic boom solution. Of course we were going to push for the repeal of the supersonic ban, and that was actually not the plan on day one. The plan on day one was let's assume we can't change any regulations, and let's keep the plan as simple as it possibly can be, and still find a big enough market. So that was so what happened was in January, January of this year, we did our first supersonic test flight, January 28th, and in the run up to that. I asked the team, I was like, hey, we're going to go fly supersonic. We should probably know what kind of sonic boom we're going to make. So we can expect it, set people's expectations, be able to talk about it, and I kind of wanted to be told, oh, it's going to be a real wallop. I wanted to enjoy that. And the team came back and they said, no, we've been talking for years about this thing called Mach cutoff, where the boom doesn't reach the ground, and you don't hear anything. And we're going to be in Mach cutoff. So there's not going to be a sonic boom. And I was actually a little disappointed.
So it looks like one of the things that could be annoying here is there's like this boom when you reach the speed of sound. It creates a loud explosion in the air. So if you have a ton of these airplanes flying around back and forth, you're just gonna get these explosions, I guess, in the air all the time, which is gonna be one of the things that could potentially take this out of the business, because I don't want things in the sky flying around and then constantly making explosions. I mean, how can you live like that? It's pretty crazy.
We did that test flight. We broke the sound barrier three times in Mach cutoff, boomless condition. Microphones on the ground confirmed it. And then I'm on X and I'm just talking with people, and the plan had been, this is a transoceanic airplane. It's not a CONUS airplane. And the internet is convinced that we're all about solving sonic boom, and I can't convince people that wasn't the point. And I remember thinking about, wait a minute, we did this thing in boomless cruise, and this physics called Mach cutoff that we can get into how that works. And we looked at it for the Overture Airliner and decided it wasn't practical because when we were building on these outsourced engines, it wasn't. You have to, in order to do this boomless thing, you have to break the sound barrier at a sufficiently high altitude that the boom can make a U-turn in the sky and never touch the ground. And the Rolls-Royce engines couldn't do it. So we sort of put it aside as impractical. But meanwhile, we started designing our own engines and optimizing them. And every time I go to these engineering meetings, I was like, well, the transonic Excel altitude just went up 1,000 feet, went up another 1,000 feet, another 1,000 feet. And I started thinking, well, what if the internet is right and I'm wrong? And so we called an emergency Saturday engineering meeting. And I said, team, we've got different engines than last time we did this analysis. We need to rerun the analysis on Overture. Can we do boomless cruise? And it took 90 minutes. And they said, thumbs up, it just works.
No kidding.
And so the next thing I did is I called the marketing team and I said, we're going to relaunch the company around boomless cruise. Everyone's going to think it was the plan all along. But we just figured it out.
And by the way, I think in the aviation industry, there's Rolls-Royce, General Electric, and one more, I forget what it is. So basically, it looks like they are making their own engine.
Man. So let's just go back. I got a lot of questions. Actually, let's talk about a sonic boom and what it is.
Yeah.
Hold on a second. Airplane engines, just to see how many are there. Companies. So General Electric, Rolls-Royce, and Pratt and Whitney are the three engine makers for the current aviation industry.
So a sonic boom is the sound an airplane makes while it's flying supersonic. You can think of it as kind of like the wake of a boat.
Okay.
You know, a boat's going sufficiently fast, it's going to make a wake. The wake's going to propagate outwards, and you notice it when it hits you. And so a big boats make a big wake, right? A small boat's going to make a smaller wake. The boat's right next to you, you're going to feel the wake more strongly than if it's further away. And a lot of that is the way sonic boom works. Big airplanes are going to make bigger sonic booms, but the further away they are, the less you hear. And then there's a distinction with booms that doesn't occur with wakes, which is they curve as they move. And they do that because there's a temperature gradient in the atmosphere. It's, of course, it's cold up high and it's warmer down low. That temperature gradient creates a speed of sound gradient. The speed of sound is higher the warmer it is,
okay,
lower the cooler it is. And so the refraction happens. Whenever a wave moves through something where its speed changes, it turns in the direction of lower speed. So imagine like you're driving your car and your inside wheels are moving slower than your outside wheels. You're going to turn towards the inside. So that when light refracts, that's why. When sound refracts, that's why. And so the sonic boom, which is this sort of compressed air band that comes off the airplane when it's flying supersonic, makes, it turns as it goes through the sky. And so if it comes off the airplane at a sufficiently shallow angle and the airplane is sufficiently high, you've got this gigantic U in the sky. And if the bottom of the U never touches the ground, nobody hears any boom.
Gotcha.
Interesting.
And so
okay.
this is the easy solution for sonic boom. For 50 years,
this is old new. I had no clue. That's how you, I guess, remove the sonic boom from hitting the ground, or making it, I guess, like lowering the volume. I guess he's saying.
People have talked about it like it's this boogeyman that's going to require, decades of R&D. Turns out this is a software solution. You just need today's weather data and an algorithm, and it tells you what speed and altitude to fly. And then there's no boom.
So basically saying that at a certain altitude with certain weather conditions, you can fly at the speed of sound, and if you are within that atmosphere environment, this plane can go at that speed and won't create the sonic boom annoying explosion in the sky that if this thing is going to be making, no one's going to want this. But based on atmospheric conditions, you can eliminate that boom, is what he's trying to say.
No kidding.
It's actually really simple.
Wow.
We can talk about why people have made it out to be a harder problem than it is.
Let's do it.
I think there is a so like NASA, for example, has been working on sonic boom suppression for decades, and they've got this R&D airplane called the X-59 that they've been working on it for longer than Boom has existed as a company, and it hasn't flown yet. They're going about this with completely different physics. It's this very long, skinny airplane, which I think is part of why it hasn't flown yet. It's really hard to make that work. And the idea is if you stretch the airplane out, it kind of spreads the boom out across more time. And so when you hear it, it's quieter.
Okay.
And that thing can go up to Mach 1.4. Boomless tops out at about Mach 1.3. So they can go very slightly faster. But that's hard mode.
By the way, speed of sound in Mach. Mach 1 is defined as the speed of sound which at sea level is approximately 767 miles per hour or 1,234 kilometers per hour.
Well, okay, well, why do it on hard mode? Well, if it's not really hard, I don't think you can justify the research program. So I think there's this dynamic around some of these R&D type efforts where the incentive for the people working on them is to make the challenge sufficiently hard that it justifies the program.
Interesting. I mean, you've had, I mean, just to start that company, I mean, you're going up against Boeing.
Mm-hmm.
You have the regulations, the speed regulations. What was the speed regulation?
It says thou shalt not exceed Mach 1, the speed of sound.
I mean,
It's a dumb regulation.
you've got some hurdles, and you have no background in aviation or aerospace.
So apparently there's a regulation where, let me see, the speed of sound regulation. The speed of sound is not a fixed value and is primarily influenced by the properties of the medium it travels. Their particular density. Let me see FAA because they are the governing body. In the United States, civil aircraft are generally prohibited from operating at speeds greater than Mach 1, the speed of sound, over land due to concerns about sonic booms and their impacts on communities. The prohibition is codified in FAA Regulation 14 CFR 91.817. So there you go. This is the thing he is trying to... this is one of the hurdles for the sonic boom that these airplanes create when they hit Mach 1, which is the speed of sound. This is what he's going to be talking about.
And I mean, how did you, when you, as the founder of the company, I mean, how did you, those are some big, those are some major hurdles to get over.
Right? Well, I remember sitting in my basement thinking, okay, take my own ego out of this. Just imagine it's the year 2050.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm retired and I'm sitting on the beach sipping Mai Tais and I'm reading, aviation history. How do I think it goes? Do I think after 150 years of not doing supersonic, Boeing or Airbus finally do it? No, of course not. Like that history never goes that way. The big guys never suddenly get enlightened.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, do I think we're still going subsonic? Sheesh, I hope not. Okay. So if we're not going subsonic and Boeing and Airbus didn't do it, how would it happen? And I just started imagining how that history would go, without me being part of it. Okay, it'd have to be an effort from outside the industry.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody who had spent their careers at Boeing or Airbus would ever do it because they'd have learned all the reasons why it's impossible. It'd have to be somebody from outside the industry. And what would the attributes of that effort have to look like?
It's crazy, right? Like the aviation industry for commercial flights hasn't changed in a long time. Like we can't, like it takes like New York, let's say New York to Europe somewhere, it takes 6 to 7 hours to get there. And in years, we still haven't figured out how to travel faster, right? Why can't we go like 3 hours worth of the trip, cut it in half or something? Like, what happened? Why can't we make faster commercial airliners? Why are we stuck with these like slow buses in the air?
And what would the leaders of that effort have to look like? Well, you'd have to be incredibly passionate about the mission, because it would be long and hard. And if you didn't care about it and you were sane, you'd give up. So mission passion, mission orientation would matter. Being able to tell the story of why supersonic would matter would be really important, because that would be the only way you could get a dream team together. And this would need a dream team. And so the ability to storytell, the ability to be persuasive, the ability to be a minnow that gets sharks to come swim with you. The startup would have to go get these airlines that are used to buying Boeing and Airbus airplanes to go buy airplanes from a startup instead. It would require this incredible power of persuasion, of perseverance. And so I put that aside, and I looked in the mirror and I said, do I look like the CEO for this? And the answer was not at all. I didn't know anything about the industry. I don't think I could have sold you a dollar bill for 50 cents. And so I said, okay, well, and a lot of these things.
Yeah, but also nobody knows, nobody sees the CEOs of companies. Maybe now, because they're starting to, come out and go on video and talk about things. But before, nobody knew who, or saw any photos or videos or anybody or any interviews from CEOs like now, because of the media landscape change. There's more interviews, there's more podcasts.
I was really insecure about. I was insecure about networking. I was insecure about sales. And I asked myself, well, what mattered more, my insecurity or my passion for this idea? And I said, okay, Blake, if you want to actually do this, you have to become that person. And I have to be willing to reinvent myself. And I have to do that continuously along the way. And so I sort of set out to become what my idea was of the right kind of leader for it.
Gotcha.
These meals.
Gotcha. Let's talk about, so it sounds like Concorde was the main inspiration, correct?
Well, it was an existence proof, right? Like, in some ways, I think it requires way more courage to go off and create something of a category that's never existed before. And Concorde existed. In fact, it was done in the 1960s. It just wasn't done in a way that made it make any sense. Like, nobody could afford to fly on it. So it was sort of dead on arrival.
So this goes all the way back to the 60s?
Concorde was established.
That's crazy. Think about this. The Concorde. So let's look at this up. The Concorde airplane was from the 60s. Okay, this thing was from the 60s. We're in 2025. This is the predecessor. This is the airplane that he is trying to build right now in 2025, which is insane. The Concorde was a supersonic passenger jet developed jointly by Britain and France, known for its speed and ability to cross the Atlantic in under 3.5 hours. It cruised at Mach 2, or about 1,350 miles per hour, and reached altitudes of up to 60,000 feet. The Concorde was retired in 2003 due to a combination of factors, including a fatal crash in 2000, high operating costs, and environmental concerns. So in 1960, this thing was traveling across the world at speeds of Mach 2 or 1,350 in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. And we're in 2025, and we just got this guy coming along with something like we're just continuing, because this was a technology from the 60s.
This goes all the way back to the 60s?
Concorde was established as a joint venture between the French and British governments by treaty in 1962. And
Wow.
it first flew in 1969, within months of the moon landing.
Wow. Who was using it?
So British Airways and Air France were the only two airlines that really operated it for any length of time. And the tickets were adjusted for inflation north of $20,000. So this was really for the royalty and rock stars who could drop a whole lot of coin to go somewhere really fast. It was not practical the way it was done then.
How long did it run for?
It was like a once in a lifetime experience. It's
27 years.
27
years. Yeah, shut down in 2003. Really with no plan to replace it.
Why was it shut down?
So the proximal cause was it was just too expensive. At this point, the successor entity of the companies that had made it was Airbus, and the market was tiny. It had always been tiny for Concorde, and they were having to make spare parts and whatnot. And Air France wasn't making any money flying it, and so the story I've heard is that Air France and Airbus kind of got together and said, let's just stop doing spare parts for this, and then the British will have to stop flying it too, and it'll force the whole fleet down. So that happened. It was. I don't know if the conspiracy theory is exactly true, but I think the reality was it died. It was stillborn. This was an airplane with 100 seats on it, mind you, 100 uncomfortable seats. Like you could think they were out of back of Ryanair or something. Not a comfortable airplane. $20,000 ticket, 100 seats to fill. That just doesn't work. You can't find 100 people that want to drop 20 grand to go somewhere all at the same time. That's why they only ever had 14.
oh wow.
Interesting.
Yeah, because I mean, $2 million. They had. I mean, maybe in the beginning it was the hype, and then by the end of the curve of the hype, then no one's buying this anymore, and then you have to maintain this Lamborghini Ferrari style airplane, maintain it, fuel cost, and then you reach a point where no one's buying seats. I mean, it makes sense. This is like a hype thing that is bound to fail due to it's too expensive,
So 100 seats, $20,000 a ticket, and then so it was actually the company that deep sixed it. It wasn't the regulations.
I think it was not the company. The French and British governments spec'd it. So let's. I think this is a big piece of kind of what went wrong in aerospace in the 1960s. So one of my controversial opinions is that Concorde killed supersonic flight. It never should have existed, and Apollo killed space exploration.
Ooh,
It also should not have gone to the moon.
big words. Concorde killed the supersonic flight, and Apollo killed the moon land, the space. Wow,
1969. And a lot of people, and I loved Concorde and I loved
big words.
Apollo, but I don't think they helped us. And if that seems like a crazy thing, just notice it's 2025 and we can't fly supersonic and we can't land on the moon.
Mm-hmm.
So
That's true, though. He's got a point.
these things that we were told in the 1960s were the harbingers of great progress didn't pan out the way it was predicted. So why? And I think the answer is that for the first 50 years, from the Wright brothers forward, innovation in aerospace was commercially driven. It was you're building a commercial airplane that passengers got to be able to afford to fly on, that airlines want to operate profitably. Nobody build a machine unless they at least believed it was going to make economic sense. And then if you're building military machines, they had to make sense for that mission. And so there was a commercial hand saying it's got to make sense, or there's a military hand saying it's got to make sense.
Right.
Either way, something's keeping us grounded.
Yeah, I guess it makes it because look, if the Concorde was now granted, like during the Wright brothers era, it led up to a war, and then airplanes were manufactured at a massive scale due to the war, and then space exploration was the hype of a culture and a society, which perhaps it might have been something to do with tourism space tourism, which is happening now in 2025. But it was kind of like shut down from 1969 and it became more of like a government thing, more of a research project. And then this Concorde was going to be the commercial aviation market of fast flying, which then didn't really happen. We went more towards packing more people into big chunky airplanes at slower speeds. So, I mean, I don't think it was like a killer, the Apollo and the Concorde. I think it was just like an inspiration, but it didn't have any fuel to continue.
And in the 60s, we pivoted to Cold War era national prestige as the motivation. And so there was a Soviet project to create a supersonic airliner. There was a European project to create a supersonic airliner. And there was an American project to create a supersonic airliner called the SST. And in all three cases, they were government funded, and they were government spec'd. And the result was everybody was building products to show technological superiority.
Competition. This is the thing that is missing now. The competition within countries to compete against each other, to build quicker and faster things, and the priority to get these things out there. I feel like that's what's missing in some of these cases, like for the aviation, for the aviation industry. There's no competition, so no one's competing to get this thing out first.
Not products that made any commercial sense. So Concorde and the Soviet airplane were very similar. The American airplane was going to be 300 seats in Mach 3, so it made even less economic sense than Concorde did. And then what happened is the American, so Congress pulled the plug appropriately on the American supersonic airplane. Concorde and Concordski were still coming. And now all of a sudden, it was not obvious back then just how economically dead on arrival Concorde was going to be. And so then America responded trying to protect Boeing by banning supersonic flight over land.
That's what it was.
That's what it was.
This was to protect Boeing?
This was protectionism. It was as long as Boeing's building a supersonic airplane, it was all fine. That project gets canceled, all of a sudden we can't have that sonic stuff. It's terrible. And I think the real tell was if it had been about sonic boom being bad, it would have been a noise limit.
Yeah, but I mean, if Boeing comes out with the supersonic, like the Concorde, I feel like they missed out on that boat, because we could have had supersonic Boeing airplanes. But I guess maybe the sound thing is the problem, right? It's like an environmental thing.
Not a speed limit. Literally, it banned supersonic flight in the U.S.
Why would the government be protecting Boeing?
Regulatory capture.
I took control.
But just,
I mean, that happens all the time, right? I think an enormous amount of the regulations that we have in any industry today are there to protect the incumbents.
So they set up a lobbying. They lobbied to put a speed limit in place so that they could have no competitors, even knowing that they had no ambition to become a competitor in that.
That's ridiculous. Putting a speed limit on an innovation
And supersonic.
I mean, I don't know exactly how it went, so I'm speculating a bit, but we had European and Russian government-funded projects to build a supersonic airliner. The U.S. taxpayer funding and Boeing to do the same thing had just been pulled. And so I could imagine saying, hey, that's Boeing saying, hey, that's unfair. You got to protect me from that. Mm-hmm. If you're not going to subsidize me the way the other guys were subsidized, then at least block them so they can't do anything here. And
so that's, I mean, and now that I'm thinking about it, if this was back in the 60s, 70s, we should have had super fast airplanes flying right now in 2025. We should have a whole layer of aviation airplanes, commercial, flying at ultra fast speed. Something must have happened. If it's the sound thing or regulations, or maybe people just gave up. But I found it like kind of weird that all of a sudden the innovation for fast flying in a commercial way was dropped. Getting people faster from, intercontinental flights, different continents, North America, Europe, Asia. Like, why wouldn't you have? Well, I understand why you wouldn't want faster connections between countries.
And then there was the public story was all about how bad these airplanes were going to be noise wise and environmentally. And a thing I've come to believe is that every bad regulation tends to have a moral cover story that's believable. Like, oh, we can't disturb sleeping babies and break windows. And then there's a real motivation, which is Boeing doesn't want to compete with Concorde. Which is never, they never say out loud. They can only say the other stuff. And so it's plausible sounding, but there's a more sinister actual motivation.
Yeah, but why wouldn't it? Why?
And you've been in business for 10 years.
A little more than 10.
11 years? Is it 11
It'll
years?
be 11 in September.
Yeah. So 11 years. And just in the past 115 days, you were able to get that banned. So, I mean, how were you, how did...
Yeah, but why wouldn't Boeing want to compete with Concorde? That's kind of ridiculous. Like, why wouldn't Boeing want to make a supersonic airplane and compete with Concorde? I feel like Boeing could have took them out of the competition, or at least would have been successful in making something like this. It just doesn't make any sense.
How did you get around that for the first 10 years?
Well,
You're 11 years, and just in the past 115 days, you were able to get that banned. So, I mean, how did you get around that for the first 10 years?
well, we had a business plan that didn't need it. As it turns out, there are about 600 routes around the planet that are primarily transoceanic. Not just New York, London, but Miami to Madrid and Seattle to Tokyo and LA to Sydney, where most of the flying's over water where there is no speed limit.
Okay.
Right. And so our basic idea
Okay. Starting to make sense here.
was, so Concorde missed on cost and it missed on comfort. So we got to solve those problems. We got to make the seats nicer and we got to get the cost down to the point that more people can afford to fly it. And today, there's really nice flatbed seats at the front of the airplane in business or first class for international flights, right? Mm. And people pay top dollar, 5, 10, 15, sometimes 20 grand to be up there. And the whole premise is, I hate the flight as long, give me a flying bed so I can sleep through it. But of course, if you make the flight twice as fast, you don't need the bed anymore. The experience could be more like flying first class.
That's true. That's a good point. Like these big airplanes that have like 300 some people cramped up into this like uncomfortable space. The front of it's first class for you to pay more money so you could sit or create it into a bed, because the flight is so long. They want to keep you in this tube for that long and have more people flying in the air. So he's making a good point. Like maybe like if the flights were faster, you wouldn't be able to keep people up in the air as long to make things like a first class section in an airplane. So he's saying now it's more about the experience of flying and flying fast, that you could just kind of like sit down and then you'll be in your location within 1 to 3 hours. So you don't have to sleep. You could just be awake the whole time or take a little nap.
Domestically. And so the basic idea was, can we improve upon the efficiency of Concorde enough that people would be able to trade a flying bed for a supersonic seat instead, and sleep at home, not on the airplane.
Mm-hmm.
And to do that, you need a remarkably small improvement versus Concorde. Like the math closes at less than 10% improvement versus 1960s technology. Now we found a lot more than 10%. We put all the extra into making the seats nicer and the airplane more comfortable.
Shop Raymore and Flanagan during the final.
That was the into making the seats nicer and the airplane more comfortable. But that was the basic idea. And if you just run the math, which for some reason I think I was just the first person who actually ran the math, there was plenty of business, in 2010s, 2020s, 2030s kind of travel demand in business class on these international routes if you could make the fares similar to what people were already paying, not stratospheric like Concorde. So that was the original plan. We didn't need to solve sonic boom. We thought we'd do that in version 2. But it turned out it was easier than anybody said. And so my experience getting that changed was, so on February 10th, we did our second supersonic flight on XB1, and we announced boomless cruise. And that night I flew to DC on this horrific flight that should have been supersonic. And by the time I landed in DC, I had an invitation to the West Wing. And so we started our lobby campaign that day. And I tweeted about boomless cruise, and Elon had responded and said, yeah, we should get rid of dumb regulations like this. So we had a bunch of people who were supporting it. And so I spent time, in the White House. I spent time with Congress. I spent time with the FAA. And I basically said, look, if we were proposing to make sonic booms, we'd have to have an argument about are they too loud or not. And reasonable people might differ on how loud is too loud and how quiet is quiet enough. But we can do this in a way that there is no audible sonic boom. So there's nothing to disagree about.
How was that received?
Universally, people were excited. So there was a bipartisan bill that got introduced in the House and in the Senate called the Supersonic Aviation Modernization Act.
So I guess it makes sense if you're flying over the ocean and there's no speed limit, and your supersonic or your Mach 1 speed, which breaks the sound barrier and makes the explosion that no one wants to hear over the land, is being all produced in the ocean. And if this guy's right about, depending on certain atmospheric conditions, and if you can figure out the days to fly, I guess, or the areas where to fly, then you won't be creating, or you will be lowering the volume of the explosion of the sonic boom. Then I guess he has like some kind of point where some of these regulations that he's talking about are can be dropped.
Act. They basically, universally, people were excited. So there was a bipartisan bill that got introduced in the House and in the Senate called the Supersonic Aviation Modernization Act. They basically said, hey, FAA, go rewrite your rules so that you can fly supersonic without a boom, you're allowed. And so that got introduced very quickly. Senator Budd introduced it in the Senate, and Representative Troy Nehls introduced it in the House. We had bipartisan.
By the way, the FAA, this is the Federal Aviation Administration in the United States, is getting bombarded right now with regulation, questioning, and things that have to be overwritten or rewritten, things that need to be dropped because of the rise of the aerial market industry. And this is not just aviation or commercial aviation. This is drones and drone technology. It's just being all cramped up all at once. And it's because also there hasn't been enough time for all this stuff to kind of emerge slowly. And now everything's just bottlenecking. It's all bottlenecking.
Support on the House. And, and then, meanwhile, I think the president looked at it and he loved Concorde. There's this beautiful video clip of him talking about how it was the most beautiful airplane ever and never really should have gone away. And he said, well, I can do it faster than Congress. I'm going to do an executive order. And so he did.
Nice. Look, how do you see your company fitting into the world? I mean, is this going to be, we kind of talked about it, I think, downstairs. I don't think it was on here yet, but, is this going to be CONUS? Is it going to be just overseas flights?
Yeah, well, I think
who's going to be able to afford it? All this stuff.
Well, let's start with the vision and we can work backwards to how we get there.
Okay.
I want to replace subsonic with supersonic for every passenger on every route, at least every long route. For the president all the way down to families.
What's a long route?
Anything that's, more than 3 or 4 hours today.
Okay.
You can kind of argue where the threshold is, where the speed really makes a big difference. I mean, I haven't found anything in the world I don't think I would be better off faster. I think everything's better faster. But for flights, over 3 or 4 hours, you can argue cutting it in half is.
Well, I mean, North America to Europe, North America to South America, North America to Asia. I think that's the first tier. First tier of I mean, these flights are more than, 7 to 14 hours. Cut that in half.
Meaningful. So, ultimately, if we want to enable more people to go more places more often, we need the flights to be faster. We need to delete, the terrible hassle and inconvenience that is air travel today. And we need to get the cost down as much as we can so that cost isn't a barrier to actually going. That's the ultimate goal. To confine subsonic jets to the, airplane boneyards, put them in museums where they belong. But it'll take a few iterations to get there. So, Overture, which is this airplane, the first commercial airplane, starts all business class. So you can kind of think of, if for people who know the Tesla story, our XB1 supersonic demonstrator is kind of like the Tesla Roadster. It proved you can do it.
Okay.
Not, the airplane was really just for a test pilot. Proved we could do it. Proved the technology was there. Okay, the first product is kind of like the Model S. It's a lot.
By the way, the plane that he's talking about, which is on the website here, is the Overture. And where was it? It's this guy right here, Overture, Supersonic Airliner. This is the plane that he's talking about. As you can see, this would be the first commercial airliner that would have the capabilities of taking passengers transatlantic at supersonic speeds. So very, very cool. You can see there. And he's got something here where it says New York to London in 3 hours and 40 minutes. So let's go back.
A lot of people can afford to drive a Model S, but not everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And then we take everything we learn from that airplane and we'll build a second generation, larger airplane that's even more affordable. And we'll probably take 2 or 3 kind of iteration cycles to the point where anybody who wants to fly supersonic will be able to afford to fly supersonic.
No kidding.
That's
and
cool.
How many passengers do you think it'll hold?
I mean, ultimately, there's going to be a whole family of airplanes. The way you make commercial airliner economics work is you need to size the airplane for the market it flies on. So you want bigger airplanes to support city pairs that have more traffic. You want smaller airplanes to be able to fly between city pairs that have less traffic. So there'll probably be a whole family of airplanes of different sizes. There's no upper limit to scaling. There is a slight advantage in smaller airplanes because they can work economically on more direct flights. Nobody wants to go to a hub and change airplanes. right? But if you can make an efficient,
That's true, but there is a business behind that layover stuff. You know, like going to another airport. The layover would be amazing if it could be eliminated. I mean, this guy's talking about all flights are nonstop. Like you won't have layover flights. These are all nonstop flights, which would be amazing. I think if he's able to pull this model off and have all these variations of his Overture airline model, this thing can really take off. It can really take off. People are going to see the difference between flying in a like a one of those, I call them buses, big airline buses, because it just crams up all these people, but it's just so slow compared to what he's talking about. So that would be awesome. Non-stop only.
long range airplane with a smaller number of seats on it, then you can connect more cities directly. And that's an added speed benefit. So there's going to be a whole family of airplanes here.
Gotcha. And when do you think these will be implemented?
Our goal is to have the first Overture roll out in a little over 2 years in 2027.
Oh,
Wow.
Fly in 28. Our goal is to be certified in 29 and, hand them over to airlines in 30. So five years is the goal.
all right. So by 2030, he's talking about by 2030 airlines. So you're going to be, 5 years. I mean, it's not bad, I guess.
Will you be your own airline, or will you sell to the airlines?
No, we'll sell. We have sold to airlines. So
have sold to
United was first to announce that they'd put an order in with a non-refundable deposit. American Airlines did the same thing. Japan Airlines was the first to do a pre-order. And I think ultimately every international airline is going to need to have this because it's what their passengers want.
Mm-hmm.
So if you don't have it, you're going to be left behind.
You want to take your community.
Well, we won't know. I mean, we still have till 2030. So by 2030, we'll see if this thing is successful or not.
What about infrastructure as far as airports? Are they going to need longer runways? Is there only certain airports that can handle a jet like that? I mean, what are some of those kind of hurdles, if there are any?
Yeah, we've worked real hard to make sure there aren't any. So any airport that can handle a Boeing 777 can handle an Overture jet. So it works with existing runways, existing jetways, existing terminals. It can run on sustainable fuel, but can also run on today's fuels. So this drops right into the air travel ecosystem that exists today, and in a way that Concorde didn't. Concorde needed an extra long runway, and you had to. It came in really fast, and so it was disruptive for air traffic control. We've been able to solve all those problems.
Really? What about the pilots? Do you need specific pilots?
Like any airplane, you got to learn to fly it.
Mm-hmm.
But it'll be like going from a Boeing to an Airbus as far as pilot training. In fact, probably a little bit easier. This is the first brand new airliner cockpit in about 40 years.
40 years since the last time that's crazy. So we're talking about these pilots are flying under 40 years of old technology. So it's basically he's saying that pilots are flying airplanes, and when you go into the cockpit of the airplane to fly it, you're pretty much in a time machine that sets you back 40 years.
Wow.
And so if you come out
40
to
years?
it's been 40 years since anyone did a brand new airliner cockpit versus they take the last one and they tweak it. And so we get to do a fundamental rethink. And if you come out to Denver, we got to get you to fly it. Because we've got a flight simulator, and it's so much easier to fly than a Boeing or Airbus. It's like going from a BlackBerry to an iPhone.
No kidding.
Like we got rid of all the knobs and switches and buttons, except a handful that are really important for safety, and everything.
It's kind of like we're seeing it now with the NASA and SpaceX. SpaceX. Every time you see a SpaceX launch, and NASA's like there observing, they always focus on the two control centers, base control or whatever it is, and I think they shouldn't really show this, but when they show the live camera in the NASA control and they show the SpaceX control, you could see the difference. It literally looks like NASA stuck in the 70s, and SpaceX is like super futuristic. Super futuristic.
Everything else is a big touchscreen, and it's really buttons, except a handful that are really important for safety, and everything else is a big touchscreen, and it's really nice. And so you don't need to be some hot shit military pilot to fly this thing. It's a little scary to say it, but we're designing it for the worst pilot. Just like there's a worst doctor, there's a worst lawyer, there's also a worst airline pilot. And, we want to...
I mean, I don't know if you want to say something like that, but I get what he means. He means, you don't have to like graduate as like the top airline, pilot. What he's saying is more like, he's going to reinvent maybe the pilot education. Maybe you don't have to learn so much pilot information or how to fly an airplane. And, maybe it takes, let's say, I don't know, 4 years to become a pilot, or maybe less. I don't know. He's saying maybe now it's like a year or maybe less just to fly this airplane if he's redesigning everything.
Design this such that the average pilot can succeed.
What will the experience be like for the passengers? You had mentioned you'd mentioned, I don't know if you were talking about pricing or is it going to look like business class?
So pricing wise, it'll be like what people pay in business class today.
Okay.
Within, we're nominal fare, I think $5,000 round trip will be very profitable on this airplane. I know that's not for everybody, but that's a pretty good business class price.
Let me see. Let's look up average business class airplane tickets price. Yeah. So the average cost, let me see, the average cost of a round trip business class ticket between the US and Europe ranges from $3,000 to $5,000. For longer routes to Asia or Australia, expect to be paying between $3,500 to $7,000 or more. Okay.
It's very profitable. And, we're nominal fare, I think $5,000 round trip will be very profitable on this airplane.
I mean, compared to Concorde, which is charging $20,000, that's a big drop.
I know that's not for everybody, but that's a pretty good business class price.
Is that CONUS? Is that OCONUS?
Round trip across the Atlantic would be about $5,000. CONUS round trip could be less than that.
Okay.
But on board the airplane,
it's not too bad. It's not too bad. And then if from that price point, if it does kick off and they start producing and then this just goes crazy, then obviously the prices will start going down.
we wanted. So years before I started Boom, I'd get on commercial airplanes, I'd look around, and I'd think, man, like, what if this thing was designed by Steve Jobs and Johnny Ive? And I just notice the number of seams and gaps from the outside of the airplane to the inside of a window. Notice, I'll say something you can't unsee it once you've heard this. If you look at the window, the underside of the overhead bin in the window seat on every commercial airplane, you'll notice there's this little brown splotch in every row. Why? So when people stand up, they bump their head, and their hair schmutz gets on the underside of the bin. And you just look all through these things.
No way. There's no way. Let me see. Is that true? Airplane under storage bins. Hair stain. Let me see this. There's no way. Hair. He's talking about under here. I guess he's talking about this part here or something. Maybe. I mean, that actually, this one actually looks like it does have something under there. Right there, there's like a little stain. That is nuts. I didn't even think of that or even notice that. Let me see here. Maybe here. Let me see in this one if you could see it. Well, whatever. That's an interesting point.
Things, they're so thoughtlessly designed. And the airplane's made by one company, and the interior is made by another company, and they're kind of just smushed together. And so we said we were going to design the airplane and the interior.
Yeah, by the way, the design on the airplanes are so old. The seats, the bins, and you can't even fit anything in there. And slowly, I mean, you can't even put your carry-on. They're charging you like so much for carry-ons now, and you can't put anything up there. They should just eliminate the carry-on and the bins from the aircraft. I mean, it's just, yeah, it's very old technology, old design, not thought of.
And they're kind of, and the airplane's made by one company, and the interior is made by another company, and they're kind of just smushed together. And so we said we were going to design the airplane and the interior together. And we hired some great designers. We were very careful to pick ones that had never done an airplane before, because we wanted some fresh thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And we've got something we haven't revealed yet, but it's, I'm pretty excited about it. And it's something that would not be possible if we hadn't designed the airplane and the engine together, and if we hadn't designed the airplane and the interior together. Both of those were big unlocks for the kind of cabin we were able to create.
When's that getting revealed?
Maybe next year. I don't know. We haven't decided yet.
Nice.
I can show you off the record if you come to Denver. We can.
That's cool. If they're designing everything in house, that's actually good because they're figuring out almost. He said it 40 years worth of old technology, old design on these airplanes. And he's able to design all in-house, the plane, the engine, the interior, the seating, the comfort, the storage, all within the same company to figure out the best possible flying experience.
And let you walk through our passenger experience lab,
I'd
put
love
on
to
some
see
VR goggles and see it. It's I think people are pretty excited for it.
And so, how fast are planes flying today? Let's do miles per hour.
Yeah, well, let's see. So I think of these things in terms of percentages of speed of sound, which is it's 75 to 85% of the speed of sound today on a Boeing or Airbus. If you got a high-end private jet, you can go a little bit faster. And then Overture will do 1.7 Mach, so twice as fast.
What is that ground speed?
Around 1200-ish. It varies with temperature a little bit. So it's substantially faster.
Do you feel that when you're in the jet?
No. The one thing you'll notice when you go supersonic is it's slightly smoother. And you'll be at a higher altitude, so you're above more of the weather.
Mm-hmm.
So nothing.
It's completely uneventful. On Concorde, they had a big screen that would show you the speed. And whenever it went through one, they'd celebrate and bring around champagne, make a big deal out of it, because otherwise you wouldn't notice.
No kidding.
And the day I'm looking forward to is in the.
Yeah, I mean, basically, even when you fly on a regular airplane, you don't notice the speed you're traveling at unless it's like when you take off. When you start taking off and the airplane is running, is rolling down the runway before taking off, that's when you feel the speed, and then it kind of puts you, hits you back. And then once it takes off and it's in the air, you don't really feel anything anymore. So
I'm sure we'll do that too. The day I'm looking forward to is when the passengers say, "Would you stop with that? I just want to get back to my movie or my book or my email." I want to make supersonic flight boring, but at first we'll make it exciting.
Are any airports? I mean, is there any airports that are giving you guys, or maybe we're not there yet, but are they going to give you pushback about landing, taking off from?
I don't think so. I mean, we've committed that it's not going to be louder than today's airplanes, and we've committed it doesn't require infrastructure upgrades. And so, for the most part, we get calls from airports saying, "Hey, would you tell us what we need to do because we want to welcome your airplane?" And our answer is, sit back, relax. You don't have to do anything. It just works. Wow. Now, of course, I mean, I'd love to redesign airports, but we don't need to. not for supersonic.
Some
anyway.
don't need that. But
yeah, airports is another whole world that needs to kind of. I mean, if we're talking about 40 years, I mean, some airports are now kind of like renovating and everything, but there are some airports that are just stuck in the past. And yeah, 40 years worth. Stuck in the past.
But, well, how are your competitors handling this, like Boeing and Airbus? They fly all over the place all the time for work. And I mean, the planes are legitimately falling apart. I mean, one of my recent flights, the overhead luggage bin like fell off in the middle of all the luggage fell on the. It's just if you fly, you know what I'm talking about. They're all outdated. Planes are falling out of the sky, and in recent history, I mean, it's just crash after crash after crash, and things catching on fire, things falling apart. I mean, they're not innovating at it almost seems like they are purposely not innovating. It's just, let's just reuse this old shit over and over until it falls out of the sky.
I think there's some truth to that.
The other thing is, like, I mean, they have a tremendous amount of airplanes. I think it would be hard to kind of just take all those airplanes and get rid of them and make new ones. Like they produce so many of the same airplanes that it's kind of hard to just wipe them out and then bring new ones in. But yeah, he's right. I mean, it's been like really, really slow in innovation. Like they just tweak stuff.
And then you come around with this.
Well, let me first paint a sympathetic picture here. Wright brothers forward to the first jets, every generation of airplanes was faster than the one that came before it. That was the primary vector of innovation. And then, 1973, we outlaw increases in speed.
Uh-huh.
Where does that leave innovation? And then, 1973, we outlaw increases in speed. So where does that leave Boeing? I mean, yes, in some ways it was an own goal, but let's be sympathetic for a moment. All they can do is improve the design they've already got, just iteratively tweak it, right? So if you look at Boeing's latest jetliner and you squint and you're not an aerospace engineer, it looks just like their first one. Tube and wing transonic airplane. Now think about what that does to kids and what industry they want to work in. I think there's a whole generation or two that did not go into aviation because the door was closed to innovation. And heck, I was one of them.
I'm not. That did not even cross my.
Yeah, it's kind of true. Like, if you look at everything else that is evolving and becoming like drones right now are the new innovation for aviation, drone technology. And the kids are gravitating, or the younger generation is gravitating more towards drone technology and drone engineering than aviation, because aviation kind of looks old, like it's stuck. Like people, I mean, still are interested in it, but the new thing, the exciting stuff is drone technology. So I get it here, what he's saying, like that perhaps there's no interest in aviation fixed wing aviation. Because if, I imagine you go to aviation school or you learn about airplanes and you're like, oh, this is technologies from like the 50s still being used in 2025. There's nothing new and exciting.
Well, that's a damn good point.
I mean, why is Boeing, literally falling apart? There are multiple threads to that story. But one of them is when the door is shut to the most exciting innovation, you can't attract the most talented people. They literally go to other industries.
That's
the drone industry.
a damn good point. I didn't think about that. So are you getting any pushback?
From Boeing or Airbus?
Yeah.
They've got their own problems to solve. I mean, so neither Boeing nor Airbus has built an all-new airliner since 2004. 2004, Boeing and Airbus launched the 787 and the A350. And since then...
By the way, Airbus, which I think... Airbus Foundation... Where is... Let's go back. We know Boeing is from the US. Airbus is from Blagnac, France. Let me see. Airbus headquarters are legally registered in Leiden, Netherlands, but daily management is conducted in the company's main office located in Blagnac, France. Okay. And the other one is Boeing. Spelled it wrong. Boeing corporate headquarters is located in Arlington, Virginia. So United States. Those are the two big guys in the aviation, commercial aviation, Boeing, Airbus.
They have not done any all new products. All they've done is take their existing things and tweak them. Airbus has been largely successful at that. Boeing has been, 737 Max has been a famous disaster. And so they've really just, Boeing especially, just gotten hollowed out. And I hope they can fix the company. Boeing's the only U.S. maker of airliners. There are only two in the world. There's Boeing and Airbus. That's it. And Boeing is like trying to get out of a self-destructive tailspin. They're not doing.
That's crazy. There's only two in the world. There's only two aviation manufacturers for commercial. I mean, if one goes and there's only one left, and if both of them go, it's the end of commercial aviation. That's just insane.
Doing new products. They're trying to competently produce the products they already have. And it's
and both companies have technology that is outdated roughly 40 years ago. So that's what we're dealing with. The aviation industry looks like it needs some kind of refreshment.
It's not a good situation.
Is this like the days of McDonnell Douglas when Boeing acquired them?
Yeah, I think that's part of the story too. I mean, there's sort of a there was a sort of GE mindset that made its way to Boeing through McDonnell Douglas.
I didn't think clean eating could ever be this delicious.
That was kind of the Jack Welch playbook. That was, okay, the way you succeed in business is to know what Wall Street thinks you're going to do next quarter and beat it by a nickel. And if you do that, successfully through whatever machinations, you can make the stock price go up and to the right, and it works great until the day it doesn't. And the way you do that is by cutting a lot of long-term stuff. So the way Boeing ended up getting run was quarter to quarter. A lot of people say they got too focused on money, and so
By the way, just to go back here so you understand, McDonnell Douglas origin was a US based. I know it was the third one. So McDonnell Douglas was formed in 1967 through the merger of McDonnell Aircraft Corporation, founded in 1939, and Douglas Aircraft Company, founded in 1921. The merger was driven by Douglas's financial struggles and needed to compete with Boeing. So there was McDonnell Douglas competing with Boeing in the United States. There were two companies, which then eventually Boeing bought them out. Right over here. Later accusation, McDonnell Douglas was eventually acquired by Boeing in 1997, making the end of the McDonnell Douglas name in the aviation industry. So just everybody eats each other up.
They didn't care about safety. So the way Boeing ended up getting run was quarter to quarter. A lot of people say they got too focused on money and so they didn't care about safety. And I don't think that's quite true. I mean, if you look at the results of their lack of focus on safety, it was the biggest financial disaster they'd ever had. They didn't pay off financially. The problem was their financial focus was short range, not long range. So Phil Condit left in 2004. I think he was the last good CEO over there. I'm fortunate to have him on our board now. And after that, we had people like Jim McNerney who explicitly said, hey, no more moonshots. And they meant no more new products. And I remember hearing that at the time, and I was in my 20s living in Seattle. Actually, I was living in a building called Concord. Maybe this is my destiny.
Are you serious?
I can't make this up. It was a little condo in downtown Seattle, a building called Concord, no E. But I remember reading that from Jim McNerney and thinking, what the heck, dude? You used to be in the literal moonshot business, and now you've just decided to give up. And by the way, if you can't attract young people before, now you definitely can't attract young people. And if you go 15, 20 years without developing a new product, you don't have anybody left who knows how to do it.
It's true.
And so the whole thing just devolves. At this point, by the way, we didn't mention how this is important to the country. Boeing's the #1 U.S. exporter, and as you know, we've got a huge problem. We don't make things here anymore. Airplanes are one of the last things we still do.
That's crazy.
And we're fumbling that.
That's crazy. We're it's the last thing the U.S. is manufacturing, the aviation industry, and it goes down to all the smaller planes too, like Cessna. Wow.
Huge problem.
Yeah. Where's Airbus out of?
Toulouse, France. I mean, they're spread out all over Europe. Yeah, Airbus is like approximately the European government.
Gotcha. Well, Blake, let's take a quick break, and then when we come back, the armor of clients and more training homes to get by these or to can be me side of how the facade or potentials was both a hurdle that I wanted to cover earlier, but I missed it. Is lack of traditional credentials was both a hurdle and an advantage. And so I wanted to kind of get your thoughts on how that. I mean, I can see how it would be a hurdle, but I'd like to hear you talk about how it has been a hurdle.
Yeah, well, I didn't walk in with any credentials in aerospace at all. I mean, I had my pilot's license, and that was about as close as I got. I remember the early days when I was recruiting. I'd fly down to Hawthorne, where SpaceX was, to try and recruit out of SpaceX, or fly down to Mojave, California, to recruit out of Scaled Composites, and I'd fly my little airplane I could fly myself, and that was like the only cred I had showing up to these meetings. And I remember talking to people, and there was sort of this pattern of like internet guys that want to go start airplane companies, and all the airplane guys were used to hearing pitches from internet guys that didn't make any sense. And in fact, they had a term for it. And people would say, "Oh, that's fruitcake." And I remember when I first met with the guy who ultimately became our first chief engineer. And I sat down. I think we ended up meeting at the subway at SFO Airport because he happened to be flying through SFO, and I was like, "Great, I'll come over." And I sat down with him, and he's eating a sandwich, and I showed him the spreadsheet model of the airplane and the sizing calculations I'd learned how to do out of a textbook. And he looked at it and he said, "No, I didn't think you'd be this far along." And then our next conversation, he's like, "Man, I've been pitched a lot of ideas by internet guys, but this one actually makes sense." So, my experience has been there's no substitute for actually knowing what I'm talking about, actually doing the work. I'd pick up, it was one of the things that I realized would have to be true about myself is I would have to be technically deep in order to know what I was doing, make the right decisions, to be able to pick the right people and have them want to follow me. If I didn't know what I was talking about, if I was just some business guy, the great people don't want to work for bosses that don't know what they're doing. So I had to learn it. And by the way, it's fun. So, so I bought every aerospace textbook that was, used for teaching at the top universities. And I've quickly found I couldn't understand them.
I started Tai Chi at
I went back and I did remedial calculus and remedial physics on Khan Academy. I didn't remember anything. I hadn't had any since high school, and I just made my way through it over the course of about a year. And so I think, in some ways, walking in not knowing anything is a disadvantage, but I think it's actually mostly an advantage because I didn't want to spend a decade of my life going and getting a new degree and then going to work at Boeing or something and trying to learn it that way. I didn't want to spend that kind of time. I didn't have that kind of time. So I had to go really focus myself on first principles. And I wanted to understand the fundamentals. And it turns out that focus is incredibly powerful. For example, you want to predict the performance of an airplane. There are really only 4 numbers that matter. There's aerodynamic efficiency, which is the lift to drag ratio. For every pound of airplane I hold up with my wings, how many pounds of drag do I incur? That's aerodynamic efficiency, 1 number. There's engine efficiency, something called thrust specific fuel consumption. Pounds of fuel per pounds of thrust per hour. How much fuel does it take to create a pound of thrust and sustain it for an hour? Structural efficiency. What percentage of my overall airplane weight is the empty weight of the airplane versus fuel versus people and cargo and payload? And then last is at speed, Mach number. So if you have those 4 numbers and you've got the correct assumptions, you can set up a mission profile for an airplane and predict the entire performance of it. And so you don't have to know. So okay, and Concorde's numbers were all published. How much better than Concorde could we do? So all of that, thinking it through from first principles mattered. Or I think I mentioned earlier that one of the other ideas I looked at and didn't do was an airline. And truth be told, I didn't actually have the courage to go double click on Supersonic first. I thought, there's no way. There's no way. But maybe an airline. And so I built all the financial models for how an airline worked. And that turned out to be really useful because I understood airline economics. And when you go model out airline economics, the first thing you learn is the fill rate on the seats really matters. A seat that flies empty just adds cost. But filling that seat versus it being empty is like free revenue. So the fill rate, they call it load factor, that really mattered. And my point in all of this was because I had to go learn it in approximately a year, I had to focus on basic truths. But it turns out focusing on basic truths, focusing on first principles, is what helped me see what other people had missed.
You had mentioned something a little earlier too that resonated with me. I think we were talking about the interior of the airplane, and you didn't want to hire the traditional designers of basically that design the traditional commercial air transportation. And it registered with me because I'm in entertainment. found myself in entertainment, hate entertainment, the industry. And I had gotten involved with managers and agents and all this other shit. And it wasn't really working for me. And what I've realized is there seems to be a roadmap, and everybody follows the exact same roadmap. You got to come out with this type of a product. You got to do this, all these different things. And when I started this, I looked at podcasts and I was like, okay, this is what everybody's doing. How can I make what I'm doing as different as I possibly can and create a better experience? I think I've done that. And then like I said, I got involved with entertainment, very unimpressive industry by my standards. And so when I started to scale out the company, which actually was just about 6 months ago, to find somebody to run it, if entertainment was on your resume, it went right in the trash.
Yeah.
And so I hired my COO, Eric. He was in the energy sector, and one of my main point to him was do not look at the road entertainment podcast roadmap. I don't want to do that. I want to do shit that I think is cool, that I like, that I want to do, start new businesses. I don't want this mold. And
Very wise.
That's the direction that we're heading in now. We have a lot of different products that are going to be rolling out later this year that have nothing to do with podcasting. Some of it has to do with tech. I'm really excited about it. But I guess what I'm getting at is none of that would have happened had I done, the typical roadmap in the box entertainment podcast type thinking.
Right.
And so when you mentioned that about the interior of the planes, it was like, good job, Shawn. You're doing it right.
I think, you could do it the other way and you end up like everybody else.
Yeah.
But the world doesn't need more of what the world's already got. The world needs more of what you, you, Shawn, or you, me, or you, anybody, can uniquely bring. So I don't know, throw out the roadmap. Be focused on facts and be focused on what, like Elon said something years ago that one of his principles was he wouldn't work on anything unless he thought it wouldn't happen without him. And you could look at that and say, what an arrogant asshat. But I think there's actually real wisdom in that. Like, what is your unique opportunity to contribute that otherwise wouldn't happen in the world? And focus on that. That's your differentiation. And don't follow the well-worn path unless you want to, be a cog.
Did you adopt that from inception?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I remember feeling very inspired by that. And it seems a little weird to say it, but I think it's actually true. Nobody else was doing supersonic flight before Boom. I've been working on it for almost 11 years. Still nobody else is doing it. And I would like to believe that at some point it would have happened without me and without Boom, but it's not obvious that it would have.
Wow. Still nobody else is doing this.
No, there are a couple people working on hyper. Well,
That's
yeah,
crazy. Into later.
China announced it right after we broke the South
go
barrier,
figure.
right?
Go figure.
So even we inspired even the Chinese. But no, there's some companies working on hypersonic weapons where their story is they want to build a hypersonic airliner. But I think they're just defense companies.
Hold on, let me see this. Because we're about to be in trouble then. So China's actively developing supersonic aircraft. Several companies and research institutions are working on prototypes and technologies for both commercial and military space transportation. China making supersonic commercial flight. Uh-oh. All right, so the competition is on. He's right.
Who were started in an era when defense was not socially acceptable. And so they had to say that it was a commercial product when really it wasn't. I mean, maybe they'll make it commercial someday, but nobody else is actually building a supersonic airliner. We are the only private company ever to have built and flown a supersonic jet. And we're the never. It's only been governments before. This was like rockets before SpaceX. Nobody done it outside of government. It never had there been a civilian supersonic jet made in America. So there's a lot of first in here.
What do you think it is within the last decade? I mean, it's just, what am I trying to say here? I guess what I'm trying to say is, I've been doing a lot of, like I mentioned, I've been doing a lot of tech interviews, a lot of, especially defense tech. And I told you, through here, I was in the SEAL teams, contractor for the CIA.
Probably nobody wants to get into this. It's probably like a really, it's like a club, and it's hard to get in, or there just hasn't been any motivation or inspiration to get into this like industry to make something new.
For the CIA, did not see a tremendous amount of innovation, in defense tech.
Yeah.
And then let's talk about the last 10 years, though. You have all these other companies. I mean, innovators just seem to be showing up nowadays. When you didn't hear about Palantir, and you just interviewed this guy the other day who's making mini nuclear reactors. We got a guy, Rainmaker, cloud seeding. I mean, there's just so many impressive young that are many impressive young innovators that are coming to the table now. What do you think yourself? I mean, you're another one of them. And what is it about the past decade or so that has motivated tech innovators to start innovating?
I could tell my story of it, and I think there's a really interesting perspective that also looks back from World War II to today, and what the arc of that has been. But for me, so I'm 44. I was, I watched the Berlin Wall fall. I kind of grew up as an adolescent, being told that the world was safe. They were kind of the post-war era, and so it was like we were like the post-defense era. Was my assumption growing up.
We just got comfortable. I think it's just we didn't need things like new things. We got comfortable, and we didn't need anything, or we didn't need to innovate anything. But I think now the world's changing fast, and we have to wake up and start catching up, as far as the U.S. needs to.
And then 9/11 happened, and then Russia invaded Ukraine, and then we've watched China, which was trending free and capitalist, kind of get recaptured by the CCP. And for me, the turning point was really Russia and Ukraine, where I was like, wait a minute, like the world is not nearly as safe as I thought it was. And we've let the bad countries, and I think it's important that we say there is such a thing as a bad country. Get powerful, and so we got to do something about that. And had I been, I don't know, 5 years later and starting Boom, maybe Boom would have been a different company. But fortunately, there are really great people working on defense tech now, and it's become. I think there are at least a couple threads recently that played together here. One is it's become socially acceptable to do a defense company. It's become more clear that we need defense tech. And then, frankly, I think we've got a resurgence of a belief in America, which we lost for a good long while. It was not fashionable to like this country. And so I think that interplays with, like, well, maybe we shouldn't be so proud. There's a whole period of time, and there's still pockets of our culture that are not proud to be American. Yeah. And if you're not proud to be American, you're not going to go build weapons to defend the country.
Yeah. I mean, even. I mean, you have all the new. I mean, Palmer Luckey, Dino Mavroukas with Saronic. I mean,
Yeah.
and you know, the other thing that I'm noticing is all of these next generation innovators are bringing all the manufacturing, including yourself, back to the United States. I mean, pretty sure Anduril's doing that.
Yeah.
Saronic's doing that. Every single innovator that I've talked to is manufacturing in the U.S. that I know of, as far as I know.
Yeah, I think it's really important too.
And so how is that happening? Because shit, it seemed like 4 years ago, nobody would talk about that. It was all going to China.
Right. Well, maybe it makes sense to start with how we lost it. And I heard a story recently that was eye-opening for me. We were out shopping for jet engine parts. We're making our own jet engine. It turns out it's really important to do it that way. And so we're shopping for turbine blades. And we're meeting with some of the high-tech manufacturers of turbine blades. And I said, well, how long does it take to get one if I gave you the design today? And they said 18 months. 18. Why does it take 18 months?
That's crazy.
Well, 9 of that is just to do the tools, the high-precision industrial molds. Well, does it take 9 months to make a mold? Like, what is somebody doing for 9 months? Well, actually, no. Most of that time is you're waiting for your turn with the tool guy.
They don't have enough.
Why is that? Well, we only have a couple of tool guys left in the country that know how to do that.
That's what's happening. There's not enough people, skilled people to manufacture in the United States. There's no skills. There's no tools and perhaps like applications because it's all gone.
Okay, how'd that happen? And then the guys across the table smiled and said, we got a story for you. Started with Chinese pirating of Western CAD software. And this is the high-end software that you use to design stuff on a computer. And of course, there's no respect for intellectual property in China. And so they'd rip off the software. And this software is, don't think this is like $100 copy of Windows. This is tens of thousands of dollars per engineer for this high-end custom software. You need to do these things. And so if you take out 10,000, multiple tens of thousands of dollars per engineer in cost, forget that there's a labor cost discrepancy. Just that alone means it's going to be cheaper to do the work in China than it is in the US. Because we pay for the software here. They don't pay for it there. Okay, now anybody who wants to save some money is going to ship their tool work to China.
That's crazy.
And if your competitor ships their tool work to China and you don't ship your tool work to China, now you start losing contracts so you're not commercially competitive. And so it sort of starts this giant sucking of talent out of tool and die design into China.
That's crazy that story it actually makes sense. Like people overseas would take the software from here and then it's all brought to another country where they're learning this massively for the fraction of the price. And we eventually became slower at learning this stuff where other countries excelled tremendously. And over the years, they perfected a craft that we could have done and just pushed it out over there.
And that that only accelerates with labor cost differences, et cetera, et cetera. And at the same time, I don't know why, but we told ourselves in America that manufacturing isn't important or isn't sexy, and it was like somehow okay to be we don't make things. And the most plausible way I can think of this is imagine China wasn't communist. Imagine China was just like another state. Okay, would it matter if would it matter if in the U.S. all the manufacturing moved to California, and in Tennessee we do software? That would be just fine.
Yeah.
Law of comparative advantage. Some of that stuff should happen. The problem is, and I think there was a period of time where this was less obvious. Of course, it's way more obvious now. Is that China's not a free country, and fundamentally, I think that not free countries are a threat to free countries. And so it became very dangerous that that stuff left.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
And then we've done, so there's that whole side of it. And then America, we've done as much, I think we've probably done more damage to ourselves than China did to us.
Mm-hmm.
So we made it really difficult to build here. So, the speed limit we talked about before is probably one of the biggest examples of that. That's the biggest regulatory own goal in history. We banned innovation in airplanes, and then 50 years later, we're surprised we can't competently make them anymore.
Mm-hmm.
That shouldn't surprise anyone.
And that's exactly what's happening with the drone technology in the United States. We are over-regulating the drone technology, and we're not innovating. That's why everything's coming from China.
Anybody?
Well, that's the other thing that every single innovator I've brought in here says is the biggest hurdle they have to deal with is the bureaucracy with the government.
It is.
In one way or another.
That's right. I mean, there is a way to... So we have found great ways to work with FAA. Like, we never had a regulatory delay on XB1. And we made it teamwork. We found a way to work in the system. We made friends with the people there. There are a lot of good people at FAA. But fundamentally, a whole lot of the system we have is really broken. So I'll give you another story. So we built a factory in North Carolina, 180,000 square foot factory, first supersonic airliner factory in America. It took longer to get the building permit than it took to build the factory. It took 18 months to get the building permit. Okay, well, why? Well, we had to get a environmental approval on the noise that would be made by the airplane after we manufactured it.
Wait, say that again?
It doesn't make any sense. We had to get approval for how much noise our airplanes were going to make after they were built in order to build the factory.
How can that be? You don't even have the planes yet.
This makes no sense. And
where does this shit even come from? Is that like a written law?
It is so there's something called NEPA, which is the National Environmental Policy Act. That was, I think, probably one of the worst laws ever. And it requires environmental, studies, pre-approval of anything that has federal jurisdiction. Our factory was on an airport, so there was federal jurisdiction. So the FAA administered it, and the FAA had a rule that basically said, well, we don't want you to be able to build anything and later on be able to increase your footprint. So anything you might ultimately do in a facility has to be approved on the day you build the facility. There is, you just pull on that thread, and all of a sudden we're doing noise studies on an airplane we haven't designed yet, let alone built yet, where our pledge has been it's not going to be any louder.
Wow.
So it
paperless parts will.
And our pledge has been it's not going to be any louder.
Wow.
So
all this regulation will slow everything down.
And I tell my business friends about this, and I'm complaining about this 18-month process, and some of them are saying, "Are you kidding, dude? That's good. You had only 18 months? Like, mine was years or decades."
That's crazy. What are we doing, man?
And I think the whole way we do permitting and the whole way we do regulation's broken.
Do you see that changing?
Or it's just too outdated and old. That could be the other thing. It's very old and outdated, and even that part, the regulation area sector hasn't innovated itself.
I mean, this is just it just makes me wonder how many more innovators are out there and how much farther ahead we would be or could be, if these regulations weren't there. I mean, it's throwing our country behind.
It is.
Just about every...
I hope that more people talk about it, because there's also a dynamic where, if you're regulated by some entity, you need to cooperate with that entity in order to actually get stuff done. And then all the pressure is, well, definitely don't say anything bad. because maybe that would sour a relationship. Maybe that, like my policy people always say, can't say anything bad about the entities that have jurisdiction over us. But I think we just need to talk about it.
No, but it's just slowing down innovation. That's the problem. They can have regulations, but it's slowing everything down.
I think the system is fundamentally mistaken. So to move forward with anything as humans, we have to take some risk.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to decide what are good risks and what are bad risks. And the way we have set the system up today is we have monopolized centrally risk decisions. So everybody wants clean air and clean water and food that's safe and drugs that work and airplanes that don't crash, right? Like, obviously. And okay, but we have to take some risks. So who gets to decide? Well, if it's related to environment, there's a monopoly called EPA that has that decision. If it's related to airplanes, there's a monopoly called FAA that has that decision. If we're talking food or drugs, there's a monopoly called the FDA that has that jurisdiction. And if they ever approve anything that doesn't work, they're in big trouble. And by the way, it happens. FAA approved the 737 Max. FDA famously approved thalidomide. And so when they let one thing through that maybe wasn't so good, now they're in real trouble. If they hold up something that is good, kind of nobody notices. And so it creates this like asymmetric bias towards conservatism. And this is not anything about anybody at any of these agencies. There are many great people at these agencies trying to do good work. But fundamentally, the incentives are all tilted. And we've monopolized risk decisions. And so that and put that aside at one point. The other point is that in many cases, we have to ask for permission before we can go do things. Like, imagine we drive to work the way we build factories or airplanes. Well, we have to get permission every day and show our plan. And okay, on this stretch of road, what speed are you going to drive? Okay, it's under the speed limit. All right, you can go. Versus what we actually do is go drive, and if you break the rules, we enforce the rules. And so the whole notion of permitting.
By the way, the airline industry, that's what they do. They have to create plans before they fly and all that stuff. They have to send out authorization in order to fly, which is more like a safety thing, and it's more like a logging. It's a logging section of the protocols, but yeah, it would be crazy if every time you stepped into a car, you would have to do that. Like, I am going to, the supermarket, so I have to send in the log.
I think needs to be rethought.
It's a good point. It's a damn good point. When you, so do you see this? How fast do you see this changing throughout this administration? Because it seems like everybody that I talk to they seem really positive.
Yeah, it's gone much better than I thought it would. Right after the election, I forced myself to sit down. Everyone was spouting opinions, right? And some people are just going to be glorious. Some people say, we're headed into dictatorship. And I thought, okay, I'm going to force myself to write down what I really think. I'm going to make 4 predictions, and then I'm going to put them down, put a date on them, and I'll come back and I'll see what I was right about, what I was wrong about, and I'll try to learn from where I was wrong. And I got going. I ended up writing about 40 predictions. I was like, well, I'll write enough. I'm guaranteed some of these are wrong. And then I'll get to learn about it. And, and one thing I wrote down was there will be deregulation, but it won't be that significant.
Mm.
Boy, I was wrong. Now, are we doing everything that I wish we would do? Probably not. But heck, we repealed the supersonic flight ban. And if you look at what's
115 days,
115 days, right? And that's not even the most significant thing. I mean, it's most significant for supersonic flight and for me. But if you look at what's happening out of energy, it's even more exciting.
Yeah.
Chris Wright, who I think is just one of the most amazing leaders we have in DC now, our energy secretary, worked with the president to get an executive order that basically zero baselines regulation. And so if you don't renew a regulation, it automatically goes away.
Nice.
Right? And we haven't even started to see that play out. From it takes, these things take a little while to be implemented. And then once they get implemented, industry has to respond. And then the building has to actually happen. So it takes a little while. But I think there is I don't know if it's a year or 3 years, there is a big boom of a good kind about to happen from a lot of that unleashing that has just barely started.
What do you think that looks like by the end of this term?
I don't know if I'm smart enough to predict timescales. It's much easier to predict the distant future than it is to predict the near future. I'll tell you what my hope is. My hope is there's enough actual positive results that people can understand it, get behind it, and not reverse it. But time's of the essence, and I think that's one of my other hopes is that this pattern of I do one term, then I go away, and I come back and I do another term. I know that wasn't the plan.
Mm-hmm.
It might actually be a really good idea, because in the time away, Trump got to rebuild his team. He got to reflect on everything he learned in his first term, what worked, what hadn't worked. Got to plan, and then they hit the ground running, because 4 years is going to go by like that.
Yeah.
And there's a bunch of entrenched resistance to change in Washington. And so the more you can just have good muzzle velocity right out of the gate, the more they can get done in 4 years.
That's another, I would have never thought of that.
All right, so I want to just fast forward to AI software and aerospace innovation, because that's the part where I think it's going to get, everything else is kind of more, you can watch the full podcast interview on the Ryan show, but I'm going to just jump to the AI software and aerospace.
Deliberately.
How's AI helped your business?
Software and AI are going to be a huge part of the success story. So one of the things that makes hardware companies traditionally harder to do is the development cycles are longer, the iteration cycles are longer. It's harder to make changes. It's harder to iterate. And so we do everything we can to make hardware development look more like software development. And so we've got a huge investment in digital engineering. And the way we do that is we hire great software engineers that are incredibly curious about airplanes. They don't have to know anything about them. They just have to think it's cool. And then we have them sit with the hardware people, and they look over the shoulders of the hardware people, learn from them, and learn how to automate the work that they're doing. And so we have I think the best airplane design tools ever made in software, and they keep getting better. And what we find is, now we can if we put new assumptions in about engine performance or aerodynamics or something, we can press a button and the rest of the airplane gets automatically redesigned. So, and that's all the power of software. And now AI just takes that a whole step further. There's an old joke in the industry that for every pound of airplane, there's a pound of paperwork. You know what AI is really good at?
Going through paperwork.
Filling out paperwork. And not only does that...
It looks like this company is about to embrace artificial intelligence, AI, on a whole new level, and might boost their innovation compared to the other companies at the moment, if this becomes all true, because they might take it to the next level.
Allow the team to be much smaller than it otherwise would have to be. It makes the jobs a lot more fun. The kind of engineer that is happy spending 2 months filling out paperwork is not the same kind of engineer that really wants to invent the future. Mm-hmm. So by having AI do the really boring work, we can thereby increase the caliber of the kind of people that want to come join the company. And so all of this gets compounding returns. The smaller a team, the easier it is to keep the talent bar high. The number one thing great people want is to work with other great people. So therefore, it's easier to attract and retain great people. We have AI do the bullshit, And then the people are doing the most exciting work, which means we can attract and retain better people. This flywheel starts to spin. It's a really important talent engine. And this is one of my biggest focuses is really building the talent engine. And we're doing a bunch of unconventional stuff. Like we actually put an engineer in charge of recruiting.
Same old phone?
Really?
It was this guy that we hired. He'd been a SpaceX manufacturing engineer. He'd been something like a 6-year boom vet. Had done a whole bunch of work on XB1. He built the flight sim for Overture. He was building the engine test facility, and I took a walk with him about 2-3 months ago. And I said, Nate, I'm going to ask you to do something different, and you're going to think I'm crazy. I'm going to ask you to run HR. And, and he's like, you're right. I didn't think that was the conversation we were going to have. And we talked about it, and I was like, look, I want an engineering mindset applied to thinking analytically about the kinds of people we select, how we select them, how we train them, how we onboard them, and think about this. And if you're willing to try it, just try it for a year. And then if you don't like it, I'll let you go. You're back to any kind of, any other job you want. But he's like 3 months into it now, and he's loving it. And it's going so well.
Good.
Interesting.
Good. Let's talk about China. So you had mentioned China announced that they were doing supersonic flight right after you came out. So where are they in the process?
The good news is we're ahead. And if we stay out of our own way, we're going to stay ahead.
Damn, this is the first time I've heard we're ahead. This is great.
Yeah.
This is great news.
Well,
Yeah, it's crazy.
Airplanes are one of the few areas where we're...
Because China's super, 15 years ahead in drone technology in the U.S. So if this is true, this is great.
still ahead in the US, but we got to be careful. So China right now is shipping a 737 clone. We don't know that in America because we won't import it here. But elsewhere, that's going to happen. They are working on a Boeing 787 clone. And earlier this year, they announced that the one after that's going to be a supersonic airplane.
Yikes.
And when they did the announcement, so I think what happened was they saw what we'd done at Boom, and they said, we got to play. And they found some research paper and then labeled it with a product number and put that out as a press release. They put it in the South China Morning Post, which is that's where the CCP puts things that they want to be noticed in the West. And so the airplane's a cartoon. Like, if you know anything about supersonic airplanes, you know this is not credible. But I think the tell was they gave it a product number that was the next product number in the COMAC roadmap. COMAC is the Chinese Boeing. So okay. I think they're dead serious about it. But we're ahead.
How do you know you're ahead?
We've actually built and flown an airplane, and they've got a cartoon rendering.
You don't think that's a disguise?
We haven't seen an airplane fly yet.
Okay.
All right.
Now they've got fighter jets, and fighter jets and supersonic airliners are not the same.
They probably do have it flying. We just don't see it. And it just, I mean, because of the drone industry, the drone technology is 15 years ahead. Just to put it in perspective. So I wouldn't, I wouldn't be surprised if they already have the plane that the little model airplane that's next to him, his plane, if China doesn't have a replica already made.
Same, but there are things you can cross-learn. I think we have to take this incredibly seriously. I don't think we can rest on our laurels. I think absent the action.
And what's going to be really crazy if they release it before 2030, because this is when I think he said 2030 is when they should be commercialized. So, and based on regulations, if that slows down the process, China might have a supersonic airplane before 2030, maybe.
To repeal the supersonic ban in the U.S. Aviation was going to go to China just like everything else has. This is like watching a slow motion plane crash. Boeing hasn't built a new airplane in 20 years. They can't, some days they can't competently produce the ones they've already designed. China's moving forward as fast as they can. That's not going to end well. Mm-hmm. We have to invent and build the next generation of airplanes here, or else we know how this ends. It ends just like it does for every other kind of manufacturing.
Why? I'm still trying to wrap my head. Why do you think Airbus and Boeing have not jumped into this race to compete with you?
I
mean, with the amount of funding that they have and the legacy companies like that, I mean, why wouldn't they?
So it has to do with most businesses are unwilling to disrupt themselves. They have to change their business model to compete.
They're comfortable. That's the bottom line. They don't feel like they're being attacked.
Let me explain why that is. So a typical international airliner today, a wide body, the twin aisles, let's say they got 200-300 seats on them. About 20% of the seats at the front of the airplane are business and first class. But those seats represent roughly 80% of the profits. All the money's in the front part of the airplane. Now, Supersonic, with the technology that we have right now, we can't build a supersonic jumbo jet, 300-seat supersonic jet, that can support economy fares. We only have the technology right now, this will change, but right now today, we only have the technology to do it for about a business class fare. Okay, if you take the business class seats out of a Boeing or Airbus airplane and put it in another airplane, the big airplane just lost 80% of its value. Right? So in order to build the supersonic future, you have to be willing to disrupt the subsonic wide body. And that's not something that big companies are generally willing to do. It's a very...
Did you say 20%, 80% of the profit is in the first 20 seats?
It's roughly 80% in the front.
Let me see something. Let's check the... How do airlines make most of their profit? So what do we got here? Airline primarily generate revenue through a combination of ticket sales, frequent flyer miles, and ancillary services, while ticket sales are the most visible. Frequent flyers, Business and first class passengers typically generate significantly more revenue per seat due to higher fares and premium services. So I mean, I guess that would make sense. Like, do airlines make more of their money through first class seats? First class tickets are very expensive. Airlines don't necessarily make most of from them. Business class is often the most profitable cabin for airlines, followed by premium economy, then first class. Okay.
Front 20%,
80% of the profit is in the first 20 seats.
It's roughly 80% in the front 20% of seats. Rough numbers.
Hey, you busy?
This is why, if you fly business class, you've got this outstanding wine list and you've got these fancy lounges and all these other perks. Why? Because that's where all the money is. Mm-hmm. On a per flight basis, vary route to route, market to market, but roughly 80% on a per flight basis. And if you look at it on a per customer basis, it's even more significant, because the people who fly long haul, international, and premium class are almost all the profit for international airlines. Again, that's why you see all those perks and why you get all the status. And, if you're global services, you get on first. And so if you move that into a separate airplane, you have to rethink a bit of the economics. And very few companies are willing to disrupt their own business. I mean, I think it takes a founder-led company in most cases. Like Steve Jobs was willing to destroy the iPod business in order to create the iPhone business.
I mean, it just seems like they would have to do it, otherwise they're going to go extinct. I mean, if you come out with this in a year or 10 years or whenever, then that's where I'm going.
Remember, there's a duopoly here. You'd be right in a normally competitive market with lots of players. But with Boeing and Airbus, there are only two. And so you get duopoly type behavior. One only moves when the other one moves. Like, why did Boeing do the 737 MAX? It's because Airbus did the A320neo. Why did Airbus do the A350? Well, it was a carbon copy, literally, of the 787. And so if one moves, the other one kind of copies that move. And for the most part, they're in a staring competition.
This is going to be more like a leapfrog change, because the only factor here is going to be speed.
Wanting to blink. And so the right now dynamic is Boeing's got to get healthy. They're in trouble. They can't do a new airplane. They've pledged they're not going to do a new airplane. What is Airbus's motivation? Well, Boeing's down and out. I should steal market share. So Airbus is trying to ramp production of their airplanes faster than Boeing can get people to trust them again. So that's that game, and like nobody's incentivized to go build a supersonic jet. Like if you're a public market investor in Boeing or Airbus, and imagine Airbus says we're going to go do supersonic instead of trying to eat Boeing's lunch while Boeing's down and out. Your investors say you're stupid. Pretty soon you get an activist gets on your board and you're fired as CEO. Reciprocally, if Boeing right now says I'm going to go build a supersonic jet, I think everyone's going to say, "What are you talking about, dude? Maybe you should figure out how to put the screws in the ones you make now." So neither of them is really in a position to do it. It has to come from a new entrant.
Do you think they'll carbon copy, or
they'll probably try to buy us first, and then they'll try to compete? I mean, I welcome that. I'm shocked, a decade into this, that we don't have competition. At some point, that will change.
Yeah, that makes sense. Probably Boeing will buy them out. Someone will buy them out. If they get by 2027, they start showcasing, either Boeing or Airbus buys this company out.
Wow. I don't know why. It's just so hard for me to wrap my head around. You're the only one doing this.
It's hard for me to wrap my head around it too. But I think it comes down to, what people call the innovator's dilemma in business, that the big guys don't want to disrupt themselves. And there are only two of them, so they don't think they're going to be competitively forced to, on one hand. On the other hand, all the conventional wisdom 10 years ago was it was impossible to start an airplane company. The last new commercial airplane company before Boom, 1921, Douglas Aircraft, it had been a century. And there are all these reasons why it's capital intensive, takes a while, highly regulated, blah 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 blah. There are all these reasons you could theoretically it's hard, and for whatever reason we were just crazy enough to go do it anyway, and then we got far enough along that I don't think it makes any sense for someone to start another company right now to compete with us. Like, okay, Boom's 10 years ahead and counting, so unless you've got a very different idea about how to go about this, it doesn't make sense to compete with us. On the other hand, we did just get supersonic flight legalized. So that opens up.
Yeah, because no one was touching it, though. At the same time, you guys just, Boom just came along and then opened up the door again.
When you can't fly supersonic over CONUS, there is basically no market for a supersonic private jet. Mm-hmm. But now that you can, there is. So I will be disappointed if nobody else does that. If nobody
else will get into private jets,
if nobody else does it, we will because it should exist. But my hope is somebody else gets there before we do.
But you got a lot of guys waiting for that to happen.
Yeah. Well, the president opened the opened the doors to that by legalizing supersonic flight over land. That market is wide open. I don't know anybody with a Gulfstream that wouldn't want to upgrade. Somebody should do that. And, you know, if they wanted to, we'd sell them engines.
And then, I mean, but even I still can't 100% wrap my head around it, because of whatever you said, 80% of the revenues in the first 20% of the seats. I mean, those seats are going there.
Mm-hmm.
Those customers
100%.
are going to go to you. And so what do those companies look like when this is online and this is becoming mass produced?
I think it ends up being...
Well, you have to eliminate all the first class out of the old airplanes, because nobody's going to want to fly them. Or economy, the whole plane becomes first class economy. They would have to make all the first class seats economy price.
being a gradual transition.
I mean, even with 130 jets, I mean, you're going to book out like...
Oh yeah,
whoever buys those is going to book out like that.
Absolutely. I mean, I think 130 is, not nearly enough. You know, if people who fly first or business today,
imagine choosing from 100 plus.
If people who fly first or business today, on a route where supersonic is going to be meaningfully faster and where the airlines can operate profitably, airlines are going to need 1,400 of these jets. And that's not assuming people fly more and flights are faster. But, for me, I'm going to go to London more when it's half the time. I'm going to go to Tokyo more when it's half the time. Mm-hmm. So probably 1,400 is a low number. Probably it's going to be way more than that.
Yeah. Does that make Boeing... I mean... There are companies that do this. I mean, I think Spirit Airlines, they have no business, correct? Southwest, They have no business.
Yeah, I think there can be...
So does that mean all the airlines...
I think there will be a middle period where where premium goes supersonic and subsonic is about low cost. And that'll be sort of a middle period. And then the cost of supersonic is going to come down, and more people are going to say it's worth it. And then there's an economic effect that I think is widely underappreciated. We call it the speed dividend. When you go faster, your main cost challenge is just the energy consumption, and so you work really hard to make the airplane as energy efficient as fuel.
The thing is, like, you're just gonna have all the planes right now are gonna have to be redesigned inside and eliminate first class. It's gonna be one gigantic bus, low cost. And then these guys are just going to take off with the full first class business supersonic. I mean, it's just going to divide. Like right now, planes have the first class and economy. It's just gonna separate those two categories into supersonic, first class, and economy, regular flights.
Efficient as it can be. But most of the other costs of flying are proportional to time, not distance. So how many pilots do I need? Well, if the flight's twice as fast, I need half as many pilots. If the flight's twice as fast, I need half as many airplanes. Or to look at it more positively, I can get twice the flights out of the same airplanes and crew. So there's all this...
think of that either.
Right? So if you could fly to Hawaii today on a propeller plane that is more efficient than today's jets, but nobody does it, because economically it would be more expensive because it takes all that extra time. So, the Overture, when we have another Overture, if we look at Overture relative to Concorde, and we imagine another step beyond Overture of a similar size, we can do economy, supersonic. And that's going to require a lot of invention. It's going to require a second generation powertrain. And boy, I get my juices flowing about that, because one of the most surprising thing about this airplane, and I think why it's just barely possible for a startup to pull this off, is it doesn't actually have any fundamentally new technology.
Okay.
This is made out of the same stuff as a 787. It's like we took a 787, we shrank it down, we made it long and skinny, we put twice as many engines. That's it. It's a lot of new engineering, but it's not any new science and it's not any new technology. It's proven stuff. And we did it that way because we wanted to keep the hurdle for version 1 as low as it possibly could be. For version 2, we're willing to say, hey, let's try 5 new things. And one of those is going to be a radically new powertrain that will allow us to go much faster while also being much quieter.
Well, let me ask you this. If I'm just curious, if why would you want to go to economy if 80% of the profit's on the first 20% of the seating? Why would you want to open yourself up to economy as a business?
I think it just should exist. And part of it goes back to that mission, and it goes back to why I started the company. Like I think about where I was a decade ago when my kids had a grandfather in Hong Kong that they couldn't see. And, you know, we didn't have the money to go drop on business class. Mm-hmm. You know, we went to Hong Kong maybe 2 or 3 times, you know, in the back of the bus. So Supersonic would not have been the cards for us. And I want every family, every kid in that situation to be able to benefit from us. I want to get there.
Wow, that's admirable.
Well, thank you. I think also you can build a great business. Because I think there is a bizarre dynamic in economy today. Like if you look at the strata of air travel, there's economy and then there's business. And business is like many times more expensive than economy. Mm-hmm. And there's sort of a little bit of premium economy emerging in the middle, but mostly the middle is empty. And I think their market dynamics, you know, like people in the airline industry keep talking about like, oh, people won't pay for a better experience. And I think for the most part, that's not true. I don't think people have found a way to deliver and market the experience that they will pay more for. Like, remember the first...
Well, the only factor here is speed, man. Speed is just has been lost. I think it just hasn't caught up to modern day. The speed at which you travel.
iPhone came out. People laugh. They're like, a $400 phone? You know, unsubsidized? No one's going to buy that. Well, no. Fast forward, now it's $1,500 for an iPhone, and everybody does it. And it's worth it. And you know, people aren't willing to pay more for better unless you find a way to actually show them a better thing they're willing to pay for. And I think the whole travel experience today is terrible.
It's horrific.
It's terrible.
It's horrific. And I'm with you. I mean, if you line up a United...
It's true. It's very, very true. The airline industry to fly today is the worst ever. And in the 60s, it was like luxury. And airline pilots were celebrities. And now the airline industry is a disaster. It's really it's horrible. Really, really just bad.
United, American, Southwest, Emirates, Qatar Airways, 110% of going with Emirates or Qatar Airways.
Right. So it's a night and day experience.
Because it's a better experience.
It's a better experience, but even in those airlines, there's still so much that could be better about the end-to-end travel experience. Mm-hmm. So I think there's a lot of room to reinvent the whole thing end to end, and to create maybe it bottoms out at 20% more expensive than economy is today, but it's 10 times better.
Yeah,
it's faster, it's more comfortable. You're actually cared for. The way baggage works needs to be completely rethought.
It's interesting, like some of these big airlines, like Qatar Airlines, Emirates, hasn't put in to purchase this because they would be one of the first. They're like the best, like Turkish Airlines. They're like the most luxurious and expensive as far as, or the best rated airlines. And he hasn't mentioned that these guys purchased anything from Boom, which is interesting.
The way you get through an airport needs to be completely rethought. And I think there's something in there that is that will be affordable, that people will be willing to pay for, that is a supersonic experience that is also way more profitable than economy is today. So one, I want to make this available to everybody. But two, I also think you can build a great business doing that. You know, there wasn't a lot of money in phones before the iPhone. And Apple found a way to build a product people were willing to pay a lot more for and built a great business doing that. And it's not been done in air travel. And some reason people think it's impossible, but like, you know, if you go look at the comparison to say other parts of travel, like hotels, there's a zillion different strata of hotels. And, you know, Motel 6 is not the mass market leader.
Mm-hmm.
You know, people pay more for a better meal. They pay more for a better hotel room, but it doesn't happen in air travel. Why? I think those are solvable problems.
What are some of the lessons you've learned from fighting some of the setbacks that you faced?
Most importantly, don't give up. And I remember the day, you know, the day that we flew XB-1 Supersonic, I stood with the team outside on the tarmac outside the airplane. And I said, guys, we're here today because a hell of a lot of not giving up. When reasonable people would have given up. And in fact, a whole bunch of reasonable people did give up along the way. And we're here because we kept fighting through the setbacks, because we didn't let ourselves lose faith. And for Overture to exist, it's going to take a heck of a lot more not giving up. And so that's, I mean, for me personally, there've been, this company has a near-death experience, it seems like almost every year. Something happens, and it's like the startup equivalent of a cancer diagnosis. And it's like, you know, like when, we lost our way for a little while, and we were trying to outsource an engine. And it ultimately, you know, we were working with Rolls-Royce, and it became clear that it just wasn't going to get there. And we started working on our own engine, and we were sort of baking that plan. It wasn't fully baked yet. We weren't ready to talk about it publicly. And then American Airlines followed United, and they signed up for up to 60 of these airplanes. And on paper, we were still working with Rolls-Royce. Rolls and Boom knew that we were going to part ways. And then Rolls freaked out and ran to the press and told them they didn't think there was a supersonic market and they weren't going to be involved. And then to the world, suddenly Boom went from high flying, you know, United is ordering, American's ordering, Japan Airlines is ordering, to like, they don't have an engine. And instantly, no supplier wanted to work with us. Instantly, we were trashing the press. I was personally called a fraud. We were unfundable. And I remember thinking, you know, if we don't find our way out of this, you know, we're toast. And I remember listening to a talk that Brian Chesky, the founding CEO of Airbnb, gave about how he led Airbnb through the crisis that was COVID. And what he said is, when you're in a crisis, you need to become more of who you deeply are and always needed to be. Go back to who you really are. I remember hearing that and thinking, we're going to go all in on our own engines. It's what we always should have done. We'd already sort of started down that path, and then we doubled down on it, and we clawed our way back. And if I think about why we were able to claw our way back, it's because I, you know, and the team at Boom believed that this should exist, and it was worth not giving up on. So, you know, really for a while, XB-1, we called it the Mojave Honey Badger.
So there you go. A new aviation company built from the ground up. Airplane designed, engine designed, interior designed, cockpit for the pilots, all designed at Boom for the new and innovative supersonic commercial airline traveling from the United States.